You are listening to A Scary State, and this week we're talking about Thanksgiving. So, Lauren?
Yes, Kenzie?
Let's get scary.
Let's do it. So you want to hear, you might have seen it, like you saw it on my Instagram story. Did you see my day yesterday?
Yes, but remind me.
Okay, so here's the story. I wake up at like 4 o'clock. I know, I wake up very early. I was so tired that I just like slept through my alarm. And so I woke up at 4:05. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to sleep till 4:12. And I was like, no, I have to get to work. I want to get to work by 5. So I get up. My morning routine. I go to the bathroom. I do my hair and makeup. I go out, start my coffee. Go back into the room, get dressed, come back out to the kitchen. My coffee is done. I pack my lunchbox and I go.
Yeah.
Start my coffee, go in and get dressed, come back out. I forgot to put a cup underneath. So it's all over the counter, all over the cabinets, all over the floor. And I'm like, okay, clean the counter first, clean it off. And I said, okay, I'm going to start my coffee so that when I'm done cleaning, the coffee will be done. Put the mug under, start the coffee. But as I'm stepping, I step into the coffee on the floor that I haven't cleaned yet. So my sock got wet. So I was like, ugh. So I threw my socks off. I grabbed the paper towels. I squat down to clean the cabinet and my pants rip. Like, fucking straight across the like back of my thigh.
Oh my God.
And these have been my pants. I've had these for years. Like they're on their last leg. I had even ordered pants the day before. Right. I had ordered pants the day before that are going to be delivered today, so the day after, because I knew that they were getting ready to be done.
Yeah.
And so I wore them yesterday to be like, last time wearing my favorite pants. Nope. Completely ripped. And it was just one of those things where I squat down, they rip, and I was just like, oh. I have to be quiet because Joe and Richie are sleeping. I don't want to rile up Roy. So, oh my God, I was so mad. But I will say, better than it happening at work.
Yes.
Because that could have been like really bad.
Really bad.
My friend was like, well, I have a blanket at my desk. Could have just like walked around with a blanket. I was like, yes. I'm going to walk around to all of my important things with a blanket.
Yeah. No.
And then Joe said he saw it and he was like, I'm so sorry, but I laughed because it was so funny.
It was funny.
The amount of people who messaged me on Facebook or Instagram who were like, oh my God.
Oh my God, I died.
And I almost was like, I'm just going to go to bed and start the day over. But I really had to get to work, so I did not do that. Oh my God.
I'm sorry, buddy.
Yeah. At least it was like all said and done funny. But in the moment, I was just not feeling it.
Wasn't funny then, but it is now.
And then I worked a 10-hour day. So on top of that, I was just like, this sucks, which is why I got his coffee.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I say as I slush the ice around.
All right.
Oh, I was just going to tell you about the creepy thing that happened in my apartment yesterday.
Yes.
So I needed toilet paper. So I went to my little linen closet, got it out, put it on. Great. Go back out into the living room and I'm getting my stuff together because I'm going to go to bed. As I'm getting my stuff together, I hear a door open. And I just look over and I see the linen closet go, and I was like, oh, fuck. And then I heard the fall of the toilet paper. So I realized that the toilet paper was falling and pushed the door open because I guess I didn't close it all the way. But before I made that connection.
Was it that moment where just everything like gets quiet and still and you just kind of do the slow turn?
I was frozen as I was staring at it and I didn't breathe until I heard the toilet paper hit the floor and then I knew why it opened.
Oh, no.
And I was like, oh, I did not like that. Oh, no.
Oh, I wouldn't like that either.
No.
I tried to see if our house was haunted. That light over there keeps flickering, so it might flicker again. And Richie and I were trying to talk to whatever was in here. We're like, if something's in here, flicker. And we both like stared and nothing happened. And I was like, if something good is in here, flicker. And we would both stare. Nothing happened. It never responded to anything we asked. So I said, okay, Richie, I think we're good.
Could be an electrical shortage.
Probably, because our lights like to flicker.
Yes. All right, shall we get into the millions of Thanksgiving facts that I've written for you?
Mackenzie went a little crazy.
It's fascinating.
So we're going to go over Thanksgiving. This will be a really good educational moment for our listeners who don't celebrate Thanksgiving.
Yes, and a little educational for the people that do, because definitely didn't learn this stuff in school
Can
about
you tell them
Thanksgiving.
that Kenzie was a teacher? All right.
Guess where I got these facts from.
Oh my God.
Weareteachers.org. Because I knew that they would be appropriate.
History class is starting now. All right, so the Pilgrims settled in an area that was inhabited by Native Americans for over 12,000 years. Pilgrims arrived on the east coast of the United States in 1620. The Wampanoag people had called the region known as southeastern Massachusetts and eastern Rhode Island home for more than 12,000 years. Today, about 4,000 to 5,000 Wampanoag live in New England. The Pilgrims and the Native Americans made a treaty of mutual protection in 1621. When Pilgrims first arrived in the U.S., they raided Native American cornfields and robbed Native American graves. Why do we suck? In March of 1621, Pokanoket Wampanoag leader,
Damn it!
Osamequin, also known as Massasoit to the Pilgrims.
Damn, you did that so well. I'm so mad.
See, if you don't hesitate and you just go straight through, it sounds pretty good.
I just get stage fright.
Yeah, I know. That's why I just go. But sometimes there are words where you just look at it, you're like, and you just freeze for so long because you're like, I don't know.
That's every time I look at a word that I don't already know how to read.
So all those people I just said made a treaty of mutual.
One person.
Oh. It was a lot of words, a lot of big words. So this one guy made a treaty of mutual protection with the Pilgrims. They agreed not to steal from or hurt each other. They also promised not to bring any weapons when they met with each other. The treaty lasted for about 50 years until the United States began a series of deadly attacks on Native Americans.
Pretends to be shocked.
Right. The U.S. became a shared space of vast clashing differences that led the U.S. government to authorize over 1,500 wars, attacks, and raids on Indians, the most in any country in the world against its indigenous people. By the close of the Indian Wars in the late 19th century, fewer than 238,000 indigenous people remained, a sharp decline from the estimated 5 million to 15 million living in North America before European contact. Wow.
Yeah.
The Native Americans celebrated many days of Thanksgiving long before the Pilgrims arrived. For example, they celebrated Strawberry Thanksgiving and Green Corn Thanksgiving. What are those?
Like being thankful for those crops and them growing and being able to harvest them.
Oh, I like that. That's cute. In the fall of 1621, Native Americans joined the Pilgrims during their Harvest Home celebration. Sometime between September 21st and November 9th, 1621, after a long period of sickness and little food, the Pilgrims finally had a bounty of crops. They gave thanks for the fortune their hard work brought them by celebrating Harvest Home, an English tradition on the last day of the harvest. We don't know exactly why, but we do know that Wampanoag leader Massasoit and about 90 of his men celebrated with about 50 pilgrims for 3 days with feasting and entertainment. It wasn't until the 19th century when it became a popular belief among Americans that this event was the first Thanksgiving. Every time I say the word pilgrim, I think of Family Guy. He just keeps going on and on with the pilgrims.
Weirdo.
I know. The first National Day of Thanksgiving in America was established to celebrate a victory over the British in the battles of Saratoga in 1777. President George Washington called for another day of Thanksgiving on the last Thursday of November 1789 to celebrate the end of the Revolutionary War and the ratification of the Constitution.
Woohoo.
Abraham Lincoln made the first official proclamation of a national Thanksgiving holiday in 1863.
All the ones after this are a lot more positive than the ones at the beginning.
All right, so now let's get into other things. So among adults, Thanksgiving ranks as the second favorite U.S. holiday ahead of Halloween, but behind Christmas.
Which I thought was shocking.
So it goes Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween?
Uh-huh.
Wow. Frozen was the biggest Thanksgiving movie opening of all time, earning $93 million domestically. So there was a movie called Frozen that took place like in the mountains, and it was a person, I think a group of people got stuck either on a ski lift or something, but it was like a scary movie. So when our friend Jessie was babysitting, she was like, it's amazing babysitting these kids because I've already watched Frozen 3 times. I love it so much. And I was thinking, why did you watch this movie with children you're babysitting 3 times? And then I found out there was a different movie called Frozen. Much happier movie.
Maybe.
There are 4 American towns named Turkey. You'll find them in Arizona, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Texas. Benjamin Franklin thought the turkey was a, quote, much more respectable bird, and in a letter to his daughter, he wrote, quote, I wish the bald eagle had not been chosen as the representative of our country. He is a bird of bad moral character. How so?
I don't know.
The third president of the United States, founding father, and author of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, refused to recognize Thanksgiving because he saw it as a day of prayer, which meant observing it as a national holiday went against a strong separation of church and state. ... Only male turkeys make the distinctive gobble sound. Females cackle. Fitting. Americans eat 704 million tons of turkey every Thanksgiving.
Pounds
of turkey every Thanksgiving. That's the equivalent of more than 40 million turkeys. Gross. During the months of November and December, the Butterball Turkey Hotline answers more than 100,000 turkey cooking questions. That's amazing.
No.
Minnesota produces the most turkeys in the U.S. There are 450 turkey farms in the state. They produce 40 million turkeys.
So basically, I guess all the ones we
Everyone
eat.
we eat. About 18% of all turkeys in the U.S. every year. That seems like all the turkeys. Oh, I guess not the whole year.
Yeah.
Just in those days.
Yeah.
On November 19th, 1963, just 3 days before his assassination, JFK became the first American president to publicly spare the turkey, who was wearing a sign that read, "Good eating, Mr. President." George H.W. Bush, the first one, made pardoning the turkey.
Chicken.
A formal tradition in 1989. Did you hear there is actually some theory going around that they found out more information about JFK's assassination, and they think they finally have like more people who were part of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
I did not read said article. I read the title.
I read a headline to an article while I was waiting for you to come back with Roy Boy, and it said that 4 teenage boys were found in a car dead, which is sad. But the part that I was like, this is why I don't go camping, because it was after a horrific camping experience. Not an incident, an experience. And I'm like, could have been me.
If we had gotten stuck in the mud, there's no telling what could have happened.
We had gotten struck by lightning.
Hit by a major piece of hail. I still
And that-
remember you walking and going, "Ow."
I was wet and I was cold and I was mad.
I thought the reaction you gave, I thought you had been hit by a tree branch.
Well, to be completely honest, I was pissed because I thought someone fucking threw something at me. And so I was mad. So who the fuck is throwing shit right now?
Do we not have enough to worry about?
And then it happened again and I realized it's hail.
Oh my God.
Baby.
But that's very sad about the boys. Okay. About 50 million pumpkin pies are eaten at Thanksgiving each year. Despite the popularity of pumpkin pie, Americans' number one choice of pie is cherry pie. Beautiful.
For those of you that don't get it,
Hopefully it plays.
we played Def Leppard, Pour Some Sugar on Me, because in it he says, "You're my cherry pie."
The average number of calories consumed on Thanksgiving is, don't worry about it and just enjoy your meal.
Mm-hmm.
According to a Harris poll, 81% of Americans actually look forward to the leftovers more than the Thanksgiving meal itself. My mom always buys bigger turkeys than we're going to need because she wants leftovers.
That checks.
A Thanksgiving mistake helped create the first frozen TV dinner. In 1953, an employee at C.A. Swanson & Sons overestimated demand for Thanksgiving turkey, and the company was left with some 260 tons of extra frozen birds. As a solution, a Swanson salesman ordered 5,000 aluminum trays, devised a turkey meal, and recreated an assembly line of workers to compile what would become the first TV tray dinners. In the first full year of production, 1954, the company sold 10 million turkey TV tray dinners. That's genius.
Mm-hmm.
We need to come up with like a really simple invention like that.
Yes,
And then get rich.
I agree.
Plumbers are busiest on the day after Thanksgiving. Things like turkey grease and even potato peelings tend to clog up drains. Is that what they're unclogging?
Supposedly.
There are around 1,000 turkey trots around the country on Thanksgiving. And for those of you who don't know, a turkey trot is a race.
Run.
A run.
For whatever fucking reason.
The first turkey trot took place in 1896 at the YMCA in Buffalo, New York as an 8K race. It included just 6 runners. Only 4 made it to the finish line. One dropped out when his, quote, late breakfast refused to keep in its proper place, and the other dropped out after only 2 miles. Same. Over 50 million people watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade every year. About 3.5 million people attend the parade in person, wow, and 10,000 people participate in the holiday event. Giant balloons were introduced to the parade in 1927, invented by Tony Sarg, a puppeteer and theatrical designer. The original oversized balloons were shaped like animals and filled with oxygen.
There is a book that we read to the kids for our narrative nonfiction unit called Balloons Over Broadway, and it's about this guy's life.
Oh, wow.
Because, like, narrative nonfiction, think of it kind of like a biography.
Oh.
So it's like telling a truthful story, but it seems like it's a story that someone maybe, like, made up.
Oh, that's fun.
Even though it's actually somebody's life. But yeah.
Cool.
Balloons Over Broadway.
Yeah. The first video game character appeared at the parade in 1993. It was Sonic the Hedgehog. The first Thanksgiving football game took place in 1876. The first Thanksgiving football game was a college match between Yale and Princeton in 1876, only 13 years after Lincoln made Thanksgiving a national holiday.
Which is weird to think about that those two people are within the same timeline.
I was thinking the same thing. like Lincoln and football.
And right.
It doesn't that doesn't make sense.
Well, they shouldn't be so close together.
That's weird.
Yeah. Although he was dead by then, so.
Oh.
He was assassinated.
Well, yeah. I don't know the year he was assassinated.
Definitely by then.
Okay. Good time frame.
Yeah.
Soon after, Thanksgiving was picked for the date of the college football championships. What were you going to say?
I was looking at the date and I was like, the Emancipation Proclamation was in 1863. And I think that was what started the Civil War. And then maybe he like just died.
You know I can't help you with any history things.
I know, but I don't want to seem silly for being like, he was dead, and then being like, someone be like, he was definitely not dead.
Don't fact check us. Thousands of college and high school football rivalries were played every Thanksgiving. I talk about one today.
Ooh.
NFL started its own tradition in 1934 when the Detroit Lions faced the Chicago Bears at the University of Detroit Stadium. So why do they always have, like, 2 teams that always get to play Thanksgiving? That seems very unfair.
I think it's one for each league.
Because it's like the Cowboys, right?
Uh-huh.
And the Lions?
It's 4. There's 4 teams, I believe, that always play. It's the Lions, the Bears. I want to say the Redskins or Commanders.
Every Thanksgiving?
Maybe it's just the Lions and the Bears that are every Thanksgiving. But I think it's 4. And 2 are from each league.
Lions and the Cowboys. They play every year on the holiday.
So it is 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look at me with the Cowboys.
Love
Thank you,
that.
sports girl over here. And composed by James Pierpont in 1857, quote, "One horse open sleigh" was written for children celebrating Thanksgiving. The song immediately became popularized as a Christmas carol, with the title officially changing to Jingle Bells just 2 years later.
Figured I'd end it with a Christmas fact, like they do at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
As we go into Christmas season right after Thanksgiving.
Exactly.
Yes. The best time of the year. All right. So yeah, those are all your million facts about Thanksgiving.
Hopefully you were as fascinated by them as I was.
All right, Mackenzie, what Thanksgiving tale do you have for us?
Alrighty, we're just gonna dive right in. All I want to do now is go home and go to bed, said famous Hooks, 35, of Fountain Valley, California, and jury foreman in the Orange County Superior Court case against Omaima Nelson for murdering her husband in the first degree. You had to see these pictures. The pictures were bad enough. Hook goes on to tell Renee Lynch, a Times staff reporter for the Los Angeles Times. The jury had just spent 6 days deliberating before delivering their verdict in January of 1993 on a case that they would likely remember for the rest of their lives. On December 3rd, 1991, the Los Angeles Times reported that 23-year-old Omaima Nelson was being held in the Orange County Jail on $250,000 bail while police were trying to figure out what happened to her husband, 56-year-old William E. Nelson, who disappeared over the Thanksgiving holiday. William Nelson failed to report to work on Monday at Cannon Mortgage, Inc. in
Tucson?
Tustin. It's not in Arizona.
Oh.
Yeah.
What state is this in?
California.
Oh, okay.
Tustin, where he was a part-time computer programmer and messenger. Sue Swanson, president of the company, said that she last saw Nelson on the Wednesday just before the long holiday. The Costa Mesa police were notified on Sunday afternoon from a friend of Omaima that she had shown him a trash bag containing human organs, which she said was inside the Corvette belonging to William Nelson.
Okay.
The police found the body parts in the vehicle, which was parked at the friend's apartment complex, and the police learned that the caller had been asked to help Nelson dispose of the organs, which had been wrapped in newspaper. Several more bags of human remains were found during the search of the Nelsons' home. At the time, authorities said that they were unable to identify the remains because of the dismembered body was in too many pieces.
Oh my God.
However, sorry, probably should have said this from the jump. Graphic as hell.
Thanks for the warning now.
Yeah. So this part is, like, this first part is as tame as it's gonna get.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Buckle up, strap in, let's go.
If you have a weak stomach or are sensitive to graphic details,
this is probably not the episode for you because mine's not great either.
Cool beans. Wow, we're always on sync.
I know.
However, they said that all the remains did belong to the same adult male. They had made a tentative identification based on the information they had, but they were not sharing that with the press at the time.
Right.
They were going to do a fingerprint and dental analysis later that day. Police Captain Tom Lazar told the LA Times, quote, "There is no known motive and we have no specific murder weapon at this time." The cause of death had not been determined because of the body's condition. Acquaintances say that the suspect married William 3 to 4 weeks ago in Arizona.
Wait, so she had only been married to him for 3 to 4 weeks?
And they honeymooned at a ranch he owns with his brother in Laredo, Texas.
Oh.
Sue Swanson told reporters, quote, "They were real quiet, mysterious people." She told them that she had only seen them together a few times. And she also said, quote, "He met the girl and all of a sudden they were married." By April of 1992, Omaima Nelson was charged and facing trial for the first-degree murder of her husband, and the trial began in December of 1992, a year after Nelson had been arrested for the crime. William E. Nelson's death was grisly, and that his wife, Omaima Nelson, was the one that killed him, those were not being disputed in court.
Okay.
However, her attorney said that she acted in self-defense after he raped her that night.
Okay, there we go. There had to be some reason.
The prosecution would argue that Nelson had more sinister motives for killing her husband.
Oh.
There was evidence that showed that William's ankles had been badly bruised from possible bondage during sex acts with the defendant the night he was killed. They would also bring to light that Nelson was also being charged in a different crime for tying up a former boyfriend during sex, hold them up at gunpoint, and demand money.
Oh.
The prosecution says that the motive was to steal her husband's money and car and run off.
Had she been married any time before? Like, is this her first marriage?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
So 2 very different stories being told. Which one is true? Well, you're going to hear both, quote, both sides, even though
one can't really tell us the side.
Right. And at the end, you can decide who you believe. And then I will tell you ultimately what the jury decided.
Oh, okay.
So a few pieces of information before you hear each story. So first and foremost, first-degree murder is usually intentional and needs the accused person to have committed premeditated murder. So for instance, they could have stalked the victim sometime before committing the criminal act. So they obviously knew she did it. What they were trying to prove was that it was premeditated.
To see which degree they're giving her?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm also going to share some of the facts loosely of the case. So how the body was found and what various witnesses, neighbors had told police during the investigation.
Oh, okay.
So a neighbor had told police that he, quote, heard the garbage disposal going on for a long time.
No.
And constant chopping sounds throughout the night and into the next morning. Neighbors told police that they last saw the couple together at noon last Thanksgiving, and on December 1st, Omaima Nelson went to her friend's house saying that she had killed her husband and needed help discarding the body parts.
Would you help me discard body parts?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I would not fucking call the cops.
Thank you. That defeats the whole purpose of me coming to you to help
fucking
hide everything.
Mitch. Some fucking friend. Although I think some reports said it was an ex-boyfriend, so I think he...
why would you go to an ex-boyfriend?
Yeah.
If my ex came to me and was like, hey, can you help me hide this body? I'd be like, yeah, give me like 15 minutes. And then I'd call the cops.
Can I do that?
Ooh. No. You're not allowed to.
Fine, I'm calling you, though.
Oh, duh.
And you know what? I'm not going to call the cops. I'm calling your mother.
Yep, there you go. That's how we deal with
Yep.
this. Worse than the cops in that case.
Exactly. So one of the trash bags was filled with body parts and a broken iron. The iron had remnants of William's scalp and hair.
Ew.
It was determined that William was stabbed before his wife began dismembering him. She had fried his hands and cooked his head, supposedly made it harder to identify him, and his torso and lower body were skinless.
How nonchalantly you say this.
Well, I've read it a bunch and written it. So I'm used to it by now.
Wow.
Yeah. Nelson is also facing 3 other felony charges in the unrelated case that will be tried simultaneously with the murder case. So she's accused of tying up Robert Hansen, a former boyfriend, and demanding money at gunpoint in November of 1990. Apparently, this is that time of year for her, November, committing crimes.
The seasonal depression.
You know what? Good fucking point. I can sympathize with that.
It's dark at like 4:30.
I'm definitely way
Everything's
more
sad.
homicidal in the winter than I am in the summer. For sure.
Yep.
And so she was being charged with assault with a deadly weapon, false imprisonment, and attempted robbery.
Wow.
So we're going to start with her point of view.
Okay.
So Omaima Nelson took the stand in her own defense and sobbed.
Her own defense?
Well, like, she had a defense lawyer.
Oh,
but, like,
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
Her, okay.
She sobbed to the courtroom as she recalled the physical and sexual abuse she experienced at the hands of her now dead husband. Nelson was born in Cairo, Egypt, before immigrating to the U.S. in 1986, where she found work as a nanny and model in California. She claimed that when she was a child, she had been subjected to abuse and female genital mutilation.
Oh.
Yeah. Omaima and Bill Nelson met in 1991 at a local Costa Mesa bar while playing pool. After knowing each other just a few days, the two got married and spent their honeymoon traveling to see and meet Bill's family.
Wow.
Omaima said that once they were married, Bill started showing his violent side.
Well, you've known him for 4 days.
Pretty much.
If you, not victim shaming or blaming or anything, but it takes more than 4 days to know someone.
Yeah. There's a lot of like,
right.
in this story. So she told the court he once said to her, quote, "I paid for you. I'm getting what I paid for."
Oh, I don't like that.
Right. When she tried to deny his desires for kinky sex. She told the court how one time her husband had handcuffed her and sodomized her and would often beat her and force her to perform oral sex.
Oh my God.
She told the court, quote, "I was looking for someone kind and nice who wouldn't beat up on me, someone to give me the love I never found before."
Oh.
She said that she had stayed with her husband because he would always apologize for his actions, and once when she tried to leave, he beat her.
Abusive relationships, why it's very hard to leave them.
Mm-hmm. Like, she says all the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Once, when they were driving home to California, William had demanded that his new wife perform oral sex in the car. When she refused, he grabbed her new kitten and threw it out the car window.
Kenzie.
Supposedly. We don't know if it's true. It's really, this, I'm telling you, it all sounds really bad right now, but wait till you hear his side.
Okay. I'll keep my comments tucked away.
That's why I'm not reacting in quite the same way, because I'm like, yeah, but just wait, because this all sounds bad, and then you hear the other stuff and you're like, okay, so did any of that actually happen?
Oh, okay. I'm prepared.
And there is evidence to make you question it.
Oh.
It's not like it's, well, I don't believe her because she doesn't have any proof. It's
right.
Like there are actual pieces of evidence that kind of contradict what she's saying.
Okay.
So, but yes, I know. In the meantime, what she's saying is very, very terrible. Don't get me wrong. He also had threatened to leave her alone in the desert or report her to immigration officials as a Mexican sex worker if she did not meet his demands. That's where I was like, if you had contacted immigration officials, even if you had said that she was a Mexican sex worker, they would have figured out that she is from Egypt.
Right. And if you emigrated here, I'm sure she has the documentation and paperwork.
She has been in the U.S. for years before meeting him.
Okay. Yeah. So she has what she needs to prove that she's not.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. She told the court, quote, "It was sex all the time, 3 times a day."
Ugh.
Yeah, I know.
That's a lot.
So much. She also shared about a time her husband had handcuffed her after they had watched pornography videos together, and he took pictures of her in a bikini. Afterwards, he had forced her to perform a sex act. She testified that she had killed her husband in self-defense when her husband began to sexually assault her in their home on November 30th, 1991. She said she had reached for a pair of scissors, stabbed him, and then freaked out, beating him with an iron and other objects until he lay dead. Nelson also testified in court that she had castrated her husband for revenge and boiled his hands and fingers so he couldn't be identified.
Damn.
Side note, one report I read said she hit him over the head with the iron so much and so aggressively that it broke. Yeah.
That's force.
And when I was reading that and then hearing like the abuse that she suffered, and I'm like, quite honestly, that level of like rage,
anger, yeah.
if she really had been experiencing all these things, that level of rage would make sense.
It would make sense, absolutely.
You know? And
Yeah.
so when I like really started reading into her story and things like that, I'm like, okay, this is definitely plausible.
Yeah.
It's for sure could be a possibility.
Yes.
However, Nelson's testimony was overshadowed by her psychiatrist, Dr. David J. Scheffner, who had diagnosed Nelson as psychotic shortly after their slaying.
Okay.
So this is really graphic.
Okay.
More so than before.
Oh, God. Okay.
I know. He had said that she suffered from mental disorders such as battered woman syndrome from her past abuse relationships kind of thing.
Okay.
And PTSD from her current relationship.
Okay. Makes sense.
He told the court, quote, I believe she was psychotic when engaged in this mutilation and almost cannibalism.
Oh.
He added that he had never seen anything, quote, so bizarre, so psychotic in his 20 years of practice.
Wow.
So Scheffner recalled that Nelson told him that she had put on red lipstick, a red hat, and red high heels as part of a ritual during the night-long butchering.
Okay.
This is thought to have maybe come from her Egyptian background and beliefs. Nelson claimed that she skinned him and dismembered him the way that she did so that he couldn't follow her into the afterlife.
Ooh.
Scheffner also said that Nelson told him she had ate William's ribs after cooking them in barbecue sauce. And she was quoted saying, I did his ribs just like in a restaurant. And then she sat at her kitchen table with the food and supposedly said out loud, quote, it's so sweet. It's so delicious. I like mine tender.
I want to gag. Like, when I eat ribs normally, I don't try to think of what they are when I'm eating them.
Yeah.
But now this picture in my head, like, you know that feeling it in the back of your throat, you're like, I'm going to gag. That's how I feel.
The doctor did say that Nelson later denied eating her husband's flesh.
Ew. Oh my God.
During closing arguments, Omaima Nelson's attorney, public defender Tom G. Mooney, told the jury, quote, can you separate what took place at the time he was killed and what took place afterwards? This woman was in a psychotic state. She wasn't rational. He also told them to consider her abusive upbringing and the torment she suffered at the hands of her abusive husband. Thoughts?
Can I say my thoughts about this?
I literally have thoughts so far.
Oh, amazing. Look at us. So, okay, I can see the killing being rage in the moment, self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you do afterwards,
correct,
not so much. That, you are in your right mind.
Yes.
You're wearing the things you need to do for your ritual, supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
You're performing this supposed ritual.
Mm-hmm.
You're completely in your own. You're sane doing this. You need to have the sane mind to be able to perform all of this.
Yes. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So does the prosecution.
Oh.
So, his side.
Okay. Right.
I'm like, when I was doing my little headings for the different sections, I was like, trial, her point of view, trial, his, well, like, not really. And a lot of it, the newspapers and things talked about what she said because it was just so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was hard to find a little bit more like on him than it
well,
was
I
her.
bet because he's not really here to talk about it.
Correct. And he wasn't like the best guy.
Right.
Like even outside of what she's saying he did.
Yeah.
So William Nelson had been convicted in 1984 for smuggling marijuana in Texas and sentenced to parole after he was released from prison. So he was in jail when she came to America.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting little point.
Mm-hmm. The former pilot had been married to Catherine Nelson, but she had filed for divorce when he went to prison.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry for a second. I was thinking, oh my God, they have the same last name. And then I realized, they're married to the man who, okay.
Yes. By the time he was released, Catherine and William were still technically married.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they were still married when William met Omaima Stainbrook, now Nelson. So there was talks in some of the articles of like, were they actually married? Some said common law marriage.
Well, because it sounds like if he met her when he was still married, they got married, 4 days after they knew each other?
Something like that.
Yeah, so I feel like your divorce didn't go through in these 4 days.
It didn't.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
It hadn't gone through yet.
Okay.
So he was still on parole for the marijuana charge. He had just been released from prison that previous July.
Mm-hmm.
Authorities said that William had a lucrative business smuggling electronic goods into Mexico aboard transport places he kept at an international airport in Laredo, which is where the ranch that he owns with his brother.
Oh, yes, yes.
Figure they're co-conspirators. According to former friends and former boyfriends to Omaima, she tried to take advantage of older, financially secure men who let themselves fall victim to the thrill of dating a young woman. A former boyfriend told authorities, quote, she was looking for guys to take care of her. Part of Williams's body had been found in his red 1975 Corvette. As Omaima was attempting to dispose of his body, the friend who had initially called the police, Jose Alfredo Esquivel, said Omaima had offered him $75,000
Wow.
to help tidy up her bloody apartment and help dispose of William's body, which is a fuck ton of money.
Yeah, it is. Were either her or her husband like really, really well off?
I think he had some money
Okay.
from the other things he was doing.
The illegal things?
Yes. So he had testified in court saying, quote, she said I was to dispose of the head, the dentures, so that there wouldn't be any trace to make out who it was. The prosecution showed nude pictures of Omaima, who was provocatively posing for the photographer. Said photographer was her late husband, William Nelson, who had taken the photos shortly before he was killed. Deputy District Attorney Randolph J. Pulowski told the court that these pictures showed a smiling Omaima without signs of physical abuse.
Just about that. You can smile if you're sad. You can smile if you're being abused.
Correct.
That doesn't mean anything.
Right. I thought that was like the weakest point in there.
And also, I wouldn't like my pictures being shown like that. Like, that's kind of invasive.
Yeah. I was perturbed when I saw that.
Yeah.
He said that William Nelson abusing his wife was a lie, and they stated that Omaima had killed her husband because she wanted his money.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, the convicted drug smuggler was known for carrying large amounts of cash, although none was found at the home, and Omaima denies that she stole anything from her husband. The prosecution also pointed out that her testimony to Dr. Scheffner contradicts her recollection of the slaying to police. She told the doctor that she was in a trance-like state after killing her husband, and she had trouble remembering many of the details of the next 12 hours as she dismembered his body for easy disposal.
But she was able to remember how to do the ritual?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it had been a nightmare.
Okay.
When she was questioned by the prosecution at her trial, that's when she had admitted she boiled her husband's hands to remove fingerprints and mixed up the body with Thanksgiving leftovers to help avoid detection in the garbage dumpster.
Oh my God.
Pulowski also asked Nelson where the rest of William's body was because, quote, we're missing about 130 pounds of Bill. You know
Oh my gosh.
you know where they might have gone. To which Nelson replied, no, he was all there.
Oh my God.
The evidence shows that Omaima planned to kill her husband and flee with his car, cards, and cash.
The 3 C's.
Uh-huh. He said her biggest lie during the whole trial was that her husband was sexually abusing her when she stabbed him. The bruising on William's lower legs, which were chopped off at the knees, shows that his ankles had been bound during a struggle shortly before his death. He told the courtroom, quote, she says he was never tied up prior to his death. He then pointed at the defendant, calling her a liar, and said, thank God we've got those legs. Thoughts?
I don't really know. Like,
if you were on the jury, what would you want to convict her?
I just feel like you can't say you were in a trance-like state if you did all these things afterwards.
So, do you think it's first-degree murder? Do you think it was premeditated?
No.
But she did know what she was doing afterwards?
Yes.
Okay.
I could see how they could argue the self-defense when it happened.
Right.
So it could have been like just a crime of opportunity. Like it just happened, like he assaulted her or whatever, and she did what she needed to, like she killed him. Didn't help she needed to do, she killed him. But then afterwards, I believe it was very methodical.
So the jury convicted Omaima Nelson on second-degree murder charges.
Okay, yeah, see?
For the slaying of her husband, William Nelson. Despite feeling pity for Nelson, the jury did not entirely believe her assertions about her relationship with him, but they did say that first-degree murder charges had insufficient evidence to prove that the murder had been premeditated.
I can agree with that.
Despite the extensive mutilation of the body.
Right.
Which I can agree with that as well. Because I'm like, I could very easily see it happening and then someone freaking out, and instead of calling the authorities, you're like, well, I'll just try to cover this up.
Right.
Yeah.
I could see that. But the fact that if she did the whole ritual stuff.
Yeah.
That's where it comes into play, where it's like you were in your completely sane mind doing all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Adding to her charges, she was also found guilty of the felony weapons charge. But she was acquitted of false imprisonment and attempted robbery of her former boyfriend in November of 1990 after tying him up. She was sentenced to the maximum of 28 years to life in prison.
Wow.
This includes 18 years to life in prison for the murder and 10 for the assault on the former boyfriend. Side note, Omaima was engaged to a new man by the time that she was sentenced in 1993.
So how long would that have been since the death? Less than 2 years.
Correct. It's like a year and some change.
So she went to jail, engaged.
Mhm.
Huh.
So she's been up for parole a couple times.
Oh.
Denied both times. Okay, I can't remember where I found it, but I think it was the one for 2006 parole. Part of her argument for why she should be released was because she hadn't hurt her new husband, who's 70.
But you're in jail.
Uh-huh.
He's not.
Uh-huh.
How would you have been able to hurt him?
Right.
That's
So,
stupid.
She was denied that one.
Yeah, that's your best argument.
So according to the Associated Press, attorney Terrence Scott, who represented Nelson in the 2006 appeal, said that the reason that she chopped her husband's body into parts was so that she wouldn't meet him in the afterlife, as Egyptian myth purportedly claims that will happen. But she was denied parole after prosecutors argued that she was still a threat.
Yeah.
So the district attorney argued that she had failed to complete any educational or vocational classes while incarcerated and has failed to abide by prison rules. Apparently, at one point became a born-again Christian, but I guess that wasn't enough.
As they all do.
Right. So if that means anything. And then in 2011, she was denied again, supposedly because she shows no remorse. She has taken no responsibility for her actions, still blames the victim. And I read somewhere that they still think she's a threat.
I can see that.
Yeah. And so now she is not eligible for parole until 2026.
I mean, that's not far.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
And so she's been in jail at that point. It would have been like 30-ish years?
Yeah, so in 2000...
No, more than 30 years. No.
30 years. But at the time, so in 2011, when she got denied, the article said that she wouldn't be eligible for parole for 15 years or until 2026.
Okay.
Which now is really close.
Right.
So some people, like I saw somewhere where they don't think that she's going to get paroled.
I feel like if she's not really doing anything to like better herself.
Well, and like one of the articles I read too said that, I don't know if it was the prosecution or somebody within the trial, whatever, had said something about like the only way that she was going to get out of prison is if she was being sent to like a mental institution.
I could see that.
Yeah. Just the way she's like talked about things. I'm like, screws don't seem completely.
I mean, that kind of is how her whole argument sounded.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
So.
like the whole heals and the ritual and that. Like, I get having your like ritual beliefs with things. Like, that's totally fine. Like your religion, your whatever,
Sure.
your culture. But when you put that into like, you know, kind of the whole murder aspect of it and then how she was talking about it and with the red and the red, it's like, you know, there's something not there if these are the things you're saying.
Correct. So it really all depends on whose side you believe. So her attorney at the time believes that Nolan killed because of the abuse she suffered for 20 years and she does deserve parole.
Nolan?
Her husband.
Oh.
Did I say Nolan?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Nelson.
Okay.
Her attorney said that he believes Nelson. Sorry.
Okay. I was like, is this a new character you're throwing in?
Yeah. However, the parole commissioners took into account many different factors, including the prison's recommendation and Nelson's record at the prison. The case is listed as one of the 50 most notorious crimes in Orange County history.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that is Omaima Nelson and the murder of her husband and maybe eating him.
With barbecue sauce.
With barbecue sauce.
I hated that so much.
So did I.
Wow.
When I was first looking at it and I was like finding articles from like blog sites and I was seeing what they read, I'm like, no fucking shot. No shot. Then I read the newspaper articles.
Oh.
I was like, oh my God. She said that to somebody.
Yeah, I think she's where she needs to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dangerous female criminal.
Yep. Which is the main reason she keeps getting denied parole. Like they still think that she's a threat to society.
Well, yeah. I mean, she hasn't really done anything. And your argument, well, I haven't killed my husband.
Yeah.
Because you're not with him.
Correct.
If you were able to kill him from prison, that's pretty impressive.
I think by the time she got to the 2011 parole hearing, that said husband was dead.
Oh.
He's 70.
Right.
So when I saw that, I'm like, well, then see, now that's a point for the prosecution. Because there's a couple of people who are older gentlemen saying that this is what you did to them.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are in jail fucking doing it again.
Right.
Like,
right.
She's 24 at the time that this happened. 23, 24.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I
Baby.
didn't realize she was so young.
Yeah. And he's 56.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I did not realize she was that young.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, it's a pretty solid argument that she took advantage of him, and that could be a reason why she did it.
Yeah.
Given her past history. And
yeah.
even her future history. And so it's hard to say. I agree with the jury, though. I think that they made a good point of like, obviously she did it. Like that was not ever a question.
Right.
But I could see it being like, well, we don't really believe her.
Mm-hmm.
But we also don't think there was enough evidence for the prosecution to say there was nothing to show that it was premeditated.
Right.
Just that maybe it wasn't self-defense.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I agree with that.
Yeah. And
absolutely
so
agree with that.
I agree with what they went with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just think it's so fantastic that the jury foreman's name was Famous Hooks.
Yeah. When you said that for a second, I was like, what?
I didn't quite grasp it at first. I had to read the sentence a couple of times.
Right. To be like, what is this?
That's the person's name.
Wow.
Famous Hooks.
Well, nicely done.
Thank you.
Good Thanksgiving crime.
Thank you. Nice feast.
Stop. No.
So what you gobbling about today?
Oh my God. So today I'm going to tell some untold truths of Thanksgiving, as well as the Thanksgiving Day disaster.
Uh-oh.
So super brief history of what we in America know as Thanksgiving, even though you already so kindly gave us 2.5 pages.
You could literally tell everyone the fun facts.
So it is a holiday celebrated on the 4th Thursday in November with turkey and tons of food. So we went into a lot of the main facts, but I just have a few more.
Also, sometimes my birthday.
Sometimes your birthday. So a little interesting fact is that though it was recognized as the first Thanksgiving, it wasn't the first time Thanksgiving was celebrated in the U.S., as we went over. So there were a couple other times. In 1565, a Spanish fleet came ashore in present-day Florida. They planted a cross on the beach and christened the new settlement St. Augustine. Yeah. In order to celebrate their arrival and christening, the 800 Spanish settlers shared a feast with the native Timucuan people. And shortly after that, but also before 1621, there was a Thanksgiving prayer service in Jamestown, Virginia in 1610. If you ever went to school in Virginia, you learned
to Jamestown.
all about Jamestown. What was it, 3rd grade? 4th grade? 4th grade.
And you've been.
Yup. And another also in Virginia happened in 1619. So apparently Virginians tend to recognize this one as the first true American Thanksgiving.
We do?
I know. I said, as a Virginian, I do not think that. But it was in a 1963 speech by JFK, who also acknowledged this one in 1619 as the first one. Yeah. So the next one is overlooked for obvious reasons.
Correct.
Which I will go into. So this is the 1610 Jamestown Thanksgiving. The colonists in Jamestown had a horrible time.
Yeah.
A bitter winter came that the colonists were not prepared for. 80% of the 300 settlers didn't make it through the winter.
Peace out.
Which was soon known as the starving time. Fitting. Those left were starting to get desperate as food was at an all-time low. They resorted to eating rats and horses, and when there were no more left, they started to eat shoe leather. But soon enough, that ran out too, and colonists weren't left with any other options. They started eating the dead settlers. But thankfully, the winter ended and British ships arrived, saving all of the settlers and bringing plenty of food. Well, all the settlers who were left. The article I read on grunge.com said, quote, "But almost nobody credits poor, ignored Jamestown because some parts of history are hard to stomach, especially when those parts belong to people."
Yahoo!
I was like, oh my God.
You.
All right, so we're back in Massachusetts. Now for a different story. The chumminess and friendliness of the Pilgrims and Native Americans is said to have lasted 10 years after the Thanksgiving Treaty that was made. 10 years after a Thanksgiving treaty that was made at that first Thanksgiving in 1621. But this treaty may not have been a willing thing to come up. It may have come up against a dire need for one. So back in 1616, an awful epidemic whipped through the area, a sickness that the colonists brought. This epidemic killed tens of thousands of Native Americans along the northeast coast, kind of what we said. They were rightfully mad, and conflict started to mount between the two groups. But at the same time, the Pilgrims were realizing how unprepared they were for the winters in Plymouth. So the two groups eventually had to agree to get along out of desperation. Well, soon enough, the Pilgrims started to get paranoid and started to suspect that the Native Americans were planning to attack them. This paranoia got so bad that Captain Miles Standish came up with a plan to get the Native Americans before they could get them. In 1623, just 2 years after the Thanksgiving Treaty, Captain Standish invited the Massachusetts tribe leader Wittuwamat and a few of his men to a feast. But there was no feast. It was all a trap that the colonists had set up. Standish and his men slaughtered Wittuwamat and all of his men. He then beheaded Wittuwamat and mounted his head on the fort at Plymouth. Dark side of Thanksgiving.
Assholes.
Yeah. So that happened in 1623. So now we have some sports accidents that occurred on Thanksgiving as well. It's a little hodgepodge of some things.
I love it.
So in the 1890s, Stanford University and UC Berkeley had a rivalry where they would play against each other every Thanksgiving. And it was a rivalry that went very far back. The games were held in San Francisco and would attract monster-sized crowds. Most of the time, there weren't enough seats for the number of spectators, which led some people to find pretty dangerous ways to view the game.
Oh, no.
Well, in 1897, the stadium, which could hold about 10,000 people, ended up having 15,000 people packed in. Some were even watching from atop the roofing.
I feel like that's like the entire population of the U.S. at the time.
Even more people than are in Wyoming. J.C. Weir, who had been hired to construct the stands, was alarmed when he saw how many people had packed themselves in. He knew he needed to warn someone that the stands and stadium could not hold the weight that was currently on it. It was dangerous. He tried to warn students he thought were in charge. He tried to warn spectators themselves, but no one listened. With all of this added weight, moments before the final whistle of the game, part of the stadium collapsed, mainly the roof, which had many people on it.
Oh my God.
Beams had fallen on fans, trapping some, hitting others. People were trapped under the beams, some people were unconscious, and many were bleeding. Pandemonium broke out as other spectators tried to help those who were under those beams and tried to help those who had been injured. Thankfully and absolutely surprisingly, no one was killed.
Wow.
But a 10-year-old boy was hospitalized after being flung from a roof.
Oh.
But he was fine. Everyone got off really lucky with how badly things could have been.
Yeah.
One witness claimed that the fact that, quote, many people were not killed or maimed for life is simply miraculous.
Yeah.
But just 3 years later, things turned deadly.
Oh, no.
So now I'm going to focus on the Thanksgiving Day disaster.
Okay.
That gives you any indication of what we might talk about. A disaster occurred on Thanksgiving.
A natural one or a forced caused one?
I will tell you soon.
Okay.
So again, it's Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
This time it's November 29th, 1900.
Okay.
And as was tradition, Stanford was playing Berkeley and San Francisco at the former California League baseball grounds, which local newspapers called the 16th and Folsom grounds. As usual, thousands of fans came out to watch what was known as the big game. The area surrounding the stadium was a working-class neighborhood in a heavily industrial part of San Francisco, so many of those fans were from the surrounding area. They could easily walk to the stadium. Spectators had already started showing up at the gates at 10:30 a.m., 4 hours before kickoff, ready to buy the $1 ticket for admission.
That sounds lovely.
But a large amount of these fans couldn't or wouldn't pay for the $1 ticket, which in today's money would be about $40.
Okay.
So,
Reasonable.
yeah. One of these fans who couldn't afford a ticket was a guy named Thomas Pedler, who was 28. He and his buddy Charles, I believe his name was Charles Monahan, he was 31, they met up around 11 a.m. They knew they couldn't afford a ticket, but they had a plan that they would sneak into the game with the hordes of people who would soon be entering the stadium.
Okay.
Sneak their way in.
Yeah.
Soon enough, though, they realized that wouldn't work. They still had some time, so they started brainstorming other ways they could watch the game. A fence lined the stadium that...
There's no TV.
Right. I didn't even think of that. So a fence lined the stadium that provided some great viewpoints, but others had already had this idea and had taken every spot on there that had a good view.
Oh, I'm sure.
The only spots left were ones that had something obscuring the view.
Mm-hmm.
Still looking around, the two finally saw a very close building. On the roof of the building, Charles and Thomas saw some people looking at the field, so they knew this was the spot they wanted. So the spot is up on a roof, like I said, and the only way to get up there was to free climb.
Oh, no.
So Charles and Thomas saw men with huge ladders up against the building. So you would climb the ladders as high as you could go, then you would get off and essentially use the windows and ledges to free climb the rest of the way to the roof of this building. This looked fun and looked like it would provide a great view of the game, so Charles and Thomas were like...
fun and games until you realize you have to get back down.
They were like, hell yeah, and ran over to the tall building.
Of course they did.
They scaled the 55-foot or 15-meter building and made it to the roof. At this point, it's still a few hours before the game, and not many have found out about this roof yet. So Thomas and Charles found a little section on the roof that had an amazing view, and they were settled in, ready for the game to start at 2:30. The building that this roof belonged to was a newly built glass factory belonging to Pacific Glassworks.
So literally like the most fragile thing ever.
Well, the roof's not made of glass.
Well,
The Glassworks company knew that the roof was a popular place to watch games because this had been an issue in the past, with fans climbing up to watch games for free. James Davis, the plant superintendent, had been made aware of this issue and had been contacted by Henry Taylor, the treasurer of the Associated Students of Stanford University. Taylor had provided Davis and his company 6 complimentary tickets to the game in exchange for them keeping people off of the roof. Probably more as a way to get people to buy actual tickets,
Fair.
to watch the game rather than getting it for free from somewhere else. Probably not that it was a safety concern. People even started to dig under the wooden fences blocking off the factory, then opening the gates for other spectators. Some fences were even reportedly broken down, so people wanted to get to this factory, get on that roof.
Wow.
Reports later said that Davis had hired security men who were there to keep the roof clear. But rather than doing their jobs, they decided to gain a little extra pocket change, and those security men started to charge people a little bit for them to gain a great vantage point of the game on the roof. So literally, they're doing the opposite of what they had been hired to do. Hired to keep people off the roof, and instead, give me some money, I'll let you get up there.
Work smarter, not harder.
No! The Stanford magazine actually had a report from 11-year-old Herman Gurig, who was an eyewitness from that day. He was a student at Mission Grammar School.
11?
Yeah.
Oh, Mission Grammar School. Okay.
What?
I thought he was a student at Stanford.
No! The genius.
That's why I was shocked.
No, he was a student at Mission Grammar School. So he was one of the many who couldn't afford a $1 ticket. He had first tried to crawl under the fence into the grounds of the stadium, but was chased away. Next, he climbed a water tower at 14th and Folsom, but the view was obstructed. He finally went to join the over 400 spectators who were watching from the roof of the Glassworks building.
Oh, shit.
He said that there were watchmen there at the glass building, quote, but it was like trying to hold back the waves at the beach. The kids kept pouring through the fence, anxious to see the kickoff. Finally, kickoff came at 2:30 p.m. There were 19,000 spectators watching in the stadium, with thousands more watching from outside in the street and on surrounding roofs. Accounts say that there were between 500 to 1,000 people up on this particular roof. So how this one is set up. There's the roof. It's 8 by 72 feet, or 2.5 by 21.6 meters long. So there's room. Most people were packed in here on a roof that was built to be able to withstand 40 pounds per square inch. So not very strong. There was also a ventilator up on the roof that a few people had climbed onto, give them a higher vantage point, but they felt it was pretty flimsy, so they actually got off to stand on the roof instead. One man even recalled, quote, all of us were laughing and jesting, and some of the fellows thought if this thing breaks, we'll all go down together. And the air at the game was electric. So I'm not going to get into all the sporty stuff, because I don't care. Each school wanted to win. And each school's crowd was making sure that their support could be heard. Each school's marching band was playing loud to try to drown out the music from the other band. So needless to say, crowd was enthusiastic, spirits were high, both from the spectators in the stadium and those on the roof. Everyone's ready for the big game. With all that was going up on the roof, a few factory workers working at the time were getting a bit worried with the number of people who were starting to get up there. Jacob Sulling, one of the workers, phoned the police no less than 4 times, each time being told that no police could be spared to come clear off the rooftop. There weren't even that many working that day in the first place. There were 40 officers inside of the stadium and only 20 outside, which I don't feel like is enough for the 19,000 people who are here.
No.
Well, eventually, the police told him to track down Lieutenant M.O. Anderson, who was somewhere in the vicinity. They didn't say where, just that he was somewhere in the vicinity. So Sulling went around questioning half a dozen policemen in person, finally speaking to one officer who told him that Anderson was within the stadium. So Sulling made his way to the stadium, but the officers stationed at the stadium barred him from entering and declined to pass his message along to Anderson.
Assholes.
Yep. About 20 minutes after kickoff, just before 3 p.m., the Glassworks roof started to make some unsettling noises. There was a dull cracking sound that was coming from one side of the roof. Thomas and Charles, who were on the other side from where the cracking sound was, looked over at where the noise was coming from. They couldn't see too well due to how many people were packed onto the roof, but soon enough, they could make out that people were scrambling away from the area. That is when a loud cracking noise rang out throughout the entire area. Fans in the stadium took notice and started looking around, trying to determine what made that sound and where it came from, but soon enough, people assumed it to just be a normal noise in the industrial complex across the street. Then a Berkeley fan, fearing that Stanford was trying to plan a distraction, yelled, "It's a job!" and all eyes and attention turned back to the game. What fans didn't know was that the loud crash had actually been caused by the Glassworks roof completely collapsing under the weight of the hundreds of spectators who were standing on top. So what was this building? So I mentioned how it's the Pacific Glassworks Company. The building itself was 55 feet high, and it acted sort of as a shell for what was inside.
Mm-hmm.
Inside was a huge furnace, about 40 feet or 12 meters tall, 30 by 60 feet or 9.1 by 18.3 meters wide. So this massive thing.
Yeah.
The furnace helped with the glass blowing. Sand and chemicals would be put in and heated to incredibly high temperatures to turn it into glass. And inside of the furnace were 15 short tons or 14 maybe tons. This article had both what we use in the metric, so I just put those in there. So if you know what that means, good. So it had that many tons of molten glass. The molten glass reached a temperature of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit or 1,650 degrees Celsius, which is on par with a red dwarf star. And it was enclosed in a series of binding rods that resembled crochet hoops, so kind of went over it like this. The company was set to fully open that following Monday, December 3rd, so they had this furnace on, getting it hot and ready to go when they officially opened. The first men to realize the absolute horror of what was happening around them were almost killed. Charles Yachts had been raking the fire in the furnace when bodies started raining down around him. Of the hundreds and hundreds of people on the roof, at least 100 fell 4 stories down to the factory's floor. Thomas had fallen as well when the roof collapsed, but he had landed on one of the wooden support beams that ran across the roof. It had been about a 5-foot or 1.5 meter fall, so he wasn't injured, but he didn't have a great grip on this beam.
Yeah.
Percy Fuller was another one who got lucky and grabbed onto something at the last second. Fuller said, quote, "We could see a Berkeley player kicking the ball and all moved to watch him closely. Then the roof sprung like a gallows trap. I grabbed something and held. Those next to me fell. I turned to the building's interior and saw a writhing, yelling mass of humanity struggling to get out of a veritable hell. One of these boys was Mark Lee, another one who fell. He was saved by his coat being snagged on a protruding beam.
Oh my God.
Thomas, Percy, Mark, and anyone else who had grabbed onto something could hear the screams and cries of those who had fallen the full 55 feet to the factory floor. They could hear the sounds of people trying to help those who had fallen as well. At one point, one of the factory workers, Isidore Ezekiel, counted 27 boys clinging to the walls and rafters.
Oh my God.
Thomas immediately started scanning the scene for Charles and saw him along with about 20 to 30 others who had landed on the big furnace in the middle of the room. This structure was about 10 to 15 feet, 3 to 4.5 meters under the ceiling. So it was a longer fall than what Thomas had, but still not as bad as those falling to the floor.
Correct.
Thomas was relieved to see that Charles was okay.
Okay, good.
Until the screams started.
Oh no.
Loud popping sounds started coming from those on the furnace, and they started contorting their bodies.
Oh.
Unbeknownst to any of the fans, the roof they were standing on top of was over this furnace. So like I mentioned, the furnace had to get hot to melt glass. The inside had to reach a temperature of the 3,000, which is actually hotter than a crematorium. That means that outside of the furnace was also hot. It was estimated that the outside of the furnace was well above 500 degrees Fahrenheit or 260 degrees Celsius. Those who had fallen on the furnace were screaming from the pain of being burned alive. Charles had also been contorting from the heat, so this is a bit intense. It's already been intense, but so he had curled up so much that he actually started to roll on top of the furnace. He ended up rolling into a crack in the furnace and right into the molten liquid glass inside. His scream stopped immediately. This furnace was also secured under binding rods, which are poles. They essentially enclosed the furnace like a cage. So those who ended up under the rods were pretty much trapped, pinned between the rods and the hot outer surface of the furnace. One man, Thomas Curran, was clasping a ceiling joist with his legs. He said, quote, "As I clung there, I saw a poor fellow who had been chatting with me strike the furnace. He curled up like a worm in that heat." Fuel pipes had also been severed in the collapse, so scalding hot oil was pouring from them onto many victims, most of those victims on the furnace. The fuel was being ignited, setting many of them on fire.
Oh my God.
It's so bad. Employees of the glassworks who had been working that day immediately jumped into action. Clarence Jeter and others raced to turn off the oil supply that was fueling the furnace and that was pouring on the victims. Other employees started to try pulling people off of the furnace. They grabbed metal poles to try to push or pull the victims to them and off the furnace. Some of the poles had hooks on the end, and that was used as well. Jeter later said, quote, "It was a horrible experience standing there beside a hell pot and seeing human beings roast to death. We did the best we could." The bands playing and the fans cheering in the stadium right next door overwhelmed the screams of those in the glasswork factory.
Oh my God.
So those in the stadium were clueless to what was happening right next door.
Was there no like smoke from all the...
I guess not.
Was there not an odd smell?
I guess not. So some high up in the bleachers in the stadium knew something had happened as they could see the ambulances and hear the police and ushers who were running through the crowd asking for a doctor. So as all of this was happening, people were starting to find out what was happening at the glass factory and started crowding outside. One man was outside, and that man was Thomas's father. He ran inside and was met with the horrific sight of seeing his son clinging onto a beam. His father watched as Thomas lost his grip and fell directly onto the furnace.
Oh.
Feet first. He then fell straight onto his stomach, then went silent. Some of those who landed on the furnace were ultimately saved, though not all made it. Isidore Ezekiel, one of the factory workers, he said, quote, "We got all but one off the oven. That little fella, a boy of about 10 years, was actually roasted to death before our eyes. His clothes caught fire and he simply screamed and lay still."
Oh.
Outside, back at the stadium, Stanford took the victory and students rushed onto the field to celebrate. They threw the players onto their shoulders and walked out to the street in a sort of parade to celebrate. This is when they became aware of the tragedy that had just occurred. They saw dozens of ambulances in front of the factory rushing people to the hospital, while thousands of family members followed, hoping for news of their loved ones. So many people started gathering at the Southern Pacific Hospital that police actually had to barricade the doors to keep the crowds out.
Oh, so now they're going to do their job.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I read a really bad quote, so if I had to hear it, you do too. So the San Francisco Call reported, quote, "Little boys in knee breeches were laid on the floor all along the length of the hall, some writhing with pains and calling for mother and father."
The baby.
I know. Bodies were taken to the morgue with fragments of the broken roof being used as their stretchers. And while there, some bodies were so badly disfigured that they could only be identified by their socks. There were actually so many coming into the morgue that officials were forced to open the city's new morgue, which was still under construction. 13 people were killed on the day of the disaster.
That's it?
With 9 more dying from their injuries in the following days at the hospital. The last of those...
Was there like hundreds of people up there?
Yes, I will explain that in a second.
I was expecting the casualties to be far higher than that.
So the last of those dying shortly after was Fred Lilly, 21, who died on December 4th. So Lilly had fractured his skull and was in and out of consciousness, though only in a delirious state. Observers noted that in his delirious state, he still seemed to think he was enjoying himself at the football game.
Oh my God.
Ugh. Our main guy, Thomas Pedler, did make it to the hospital and he survived.
Oh, okay.
But died 3 years later after succumbing to his injuries.
Oh no.
I know. During that time, he endured spinal surgery, paralysis, and amputation. When all was said and done, the final death toll of the roof collapse was 23 people, with over 100 injured.
Oh my goodness.
All were male and most were children, with ages ranging between 46 and 9. The 46-year-old was mine worker Meek Van Dyke, and the 9-year-old was Lawrence Meal. 15 of those killed were under the age of 18, and many of the victims lived within walking distance of the grounds. Days after the disaster, many American newspapers published the story of the tragedy on their front page, with the San Francisco Examiner publishing a 5-page story about it. Though the sports section of these newspapers talked about the game itself, talking about Stanford's victory and not even mentioning the tragedy that had occurred next door.
Wow.
The San Francisco Chronicle talked about the game saying, quote, "Closest and most exciting game of football ever played by the 11s of the 2 California universities." But they, like many other newspapers, didn't even mention the tragedy. The student newspapers at each university also paid little attention to the disaster.
Wow.
The San Francisco Call did talk about the incident and referred to it as, quote, "perhaps the most horrifying accident that ever occurred in San Francisco." The weekend that followed held many funerals, some even running back to back.
Oh my God.
And months later, the Stanford Yearbook referred to the victory at the game that day as, quote, "the most ecstatic moment of the year to the lovers of athletics." Didn't make any mention of anything else. I know. The traumatized and grieving city wanted to find someone responsible for the tragedy, so a grand jury was convened. Davis, the plant supervisor, said that his men had done everything they possibly could to keep the crowd out.
Yes.
He also denied the claims that the security he had hired were offering entrance fees to the roof.
But then that would be their fault. Like
He
the
said-
security people's fault, right?
Yeah, but he said they didn't do it.
Okay.
So he's like, we did everything we could.
Yeah.
They weren't charging people to get onto the roof. Like, no.
Yeah.
The jury was starting to lean towards blaming the tragedy on police incompetence.
Yes.
One juror said, quote, "It is very strange that the police officials did not detail enough men to the football game to keep people from crowding dangerous places."
Yes.
So, like I had said, they had very few working. None went to help deal with the roof situation, even after employees asked for their help. But 7 days after the disaster, the jury placed all the blame on the dead, those who had climbed onto the glass works roof to watch the game. They said, quote, "The deceased had no business being there. No one can be held responsible for their deaths other than themselves." Rulings like this have since changed, and it is no longer their fault. It's more like it kept going back to the woman who ordered McDonald's coffee and then sued them because the coffee was hot and burned her legs. So now there's a warning on cups that say, "Caution, this beverage is hot." Yeah.
Yeah, if there's no like warning sign,
Right.
if there's nothing
So-
to indicate that it's dangerous, you shouldn't do it.
Right. So that's kind of, there was a whole article that I didn't read into because it was very legal, but it was a lot of things like this ruling would not hold up today.
No.
Like they would never say that it was the people who went onto the roof. Like, yes,
No.
they shouldn't have, but
Right.
it's like the plant didn't do what they should have done. The officers didn't do what they should have done. So
There
it was
was
never
not ample signage, all that kind
Right.
of stuff. Yeah.
right. Today, a UCSF, so I think that's University of California, San Francisco, something like that. That one of those buildings now stands at the site of the disaster, and no physical memorial exists in reference to this disaster, other than a cross at 12-year-old Cornelius McMahon's grave at the Holy Cross Cemetery. It seems to have been lost in time, and many don't even know about the biggest tragedy in sports history.
Wow.
I know it's kind of short, but I know. Ugh.
Here's the thing. Yes, ideally, people think common sense. Don't climb up on a roof, especially when there's literally no access to it.
It was also 1900.
Right.
But yes. So that is the Thanksgiving Day disaster.
I mean, when you said that it was like mostly men and children.
It was only men.
Yeah.
It was only men.
Yeah. Not shocking. The children part, you cannot blame them. They're children.
And yeah, like we were saying with like, you see this building, there's no safety regulations back then. So you're thinking, excellent view of the field.
I definitely think I would have had the thought process, there's no actual way to get up there. So that would be a stupid idea.
There were no women.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me find the picture to show you.
This is why women have a longer lifespan than men.
I will show you what the place looked like how close the stadium was to the field.
Yeah.
If we remember, we will post it. I'll show you a lot of the pictures, but
yeah.
Craig. And apparently, like some people who are related to some people who were there, like grandkids, whatever, they said that this is like nowhere.
Yeah.
Like this information. I only found like a couple articles about it. And all of the articles were pretty much saying the same thing. Again, why it was so short.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like not. And you would think it would be more talked about because it's literally the biggest tragedy in sports history. Like that's what it's known as.
I feel like because it clearly sounds like people were trying to say, hey, like something's not good, something's happening. And I think probably what happened in the past with the stadium just straight up collapsing.
Yes.
Maybe
3 years before.
Right. Like maybe they didn't want another scandal.
Maybe. But oof.
I'm like, as you were talking about them curling up, I'm like,
oh my God, I
it's
know.
like a piece of paper in a
I
fire.
I know. It's so, oh my God, I know.
I'm like, that happens to like other, like the worm analogy was great.
Right.
But to think of it happening to
a human.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why when you were like, oh, this is a little graphic, I was like, oh, yes.
Yeah, so 2 very graphic stories for your Thanksgiving episode.
The day you're supposed to be very thankful.
Well, thankfully, this will come out full.
Didn't you do that last time?
I don't know, did I?
I feel like you did.
Well, I have to go back and listen.
Or am I just having deja vu?
Maybe.
Oh.
Well, thankfully, this will come out after Thanksgiving, so you will have already eaten.
You'll just be munching on leftovers.
Yeah, and hopefully, this maybe doesn't ruin your appetite.
So thanks for listening.
As always. And we hope you had fantastic holidays.
With whoever you spent it with and however you decided to spend it.
Correct. Most importantly, everyone should have celebrated on the 24th for my birthday. That was really the whole point of last week.
Pretty much, yes. And we'd be thankful if you would go rate and review us.
Yeah. There are people who've gotten stickers.
Yeah, so
we're not just blowing shit out our ass.
Right. So rate and review us. Send us an email at ascarystatepodcast@gmail.com when you have done so, and we will send you a sticker.
Correctamundo.
So that's all we have. So stay scary.
And stay safe.